Hello, I will continue to talk about the rules of chess. First of all, I will start with the progress of the game. The player with the white tools is the first to play. Each player in turn moves one of the tools in his possession, only one tool, except in the case of castling that I have already explained. The rule of castling uh, in castling actually two tools move in one turn. The rook and the king moves, and it is considered as one move. Also, if you do the long castling, the big castling, the king and the rook moves, and it is considered as one move. Although two tools move, it is considered as one move. That's called castling. Okay. So each player in turn moves one of the tools until a decision is made. The player can move any piece in turn and move it wherever he wants, provided that he doesn't violate the rules for moving the pieces. Also, if a certain player's king is exposed to a threat from an opponent's piece, a situation known as check, the player must do everything in his power to eliminate this situation. Yes, I will give you an example. If, for example, this is the situation, so in this position, the white king is threatened in check by the black bishop, so the white side must eliminate the threat of check immediately. The white must stop the threat of check immediately. If he fails to eliminate the threat he will lose the game in a state known as checkmate. So I will give you the example of checkmate. Actually, this position is a position of checkmate or mate. Why? Because the black bishop threatens check on the white king, and the king cannot escape the threat of check because he has nowhere to go. He cannot go to the square f5 because this square, in this square, will be threatened by the pawn g6. He also cannot go to the square e5 because in the square e5 he will be threatened by the pawn f6, and he also cannot go to the square d5 because in the square d5 is threatened by the bishop. So actually I made a mistake because he has a square to go. It is not a checkmate, so I will correct the position. So now it is correct. In this position, actually, the black made a checkmate to the white. Why? Because in this position, after I correct the position, the white king has nowhere to go to escape from the threat of check by the black bishop. As I have already mentioned, he cannot go to the squares f5 or e5 or d5 because in these squares he will be threatened by the pawns or by the bishop. So this is a position of a mate. The black did a mate or checkmate to the white king, so the black side won the game. Okay, so in this position, as I've already told you, the black bishop threatens check to the white king, so any move that doesn't result in stopping the check immediately will be illegal. So, for example, if the white does this move, it is considered as an illegal move. Why? Because the white king is under a threat of check by the black bishop, so he must stop the threat of check. So this is an illegal move. And he must, in this case, he can move the king to a square that it is not threatened by check. For example, he can move the king to d3, or he can move the king to f4, or there is a third possibility. He can actually move the pawn to block the line of the attack. He can do the move pawn d4 to d5, and in this way he blocked the attack line of the bishop, and this move is a legal move. In addition to this, any move that would immediately result in the player's king being in check is also illegal. So I'll give you an example what I mean. In this position, or I will change the position. In this position, the move king e4 to f4 is an illegal move. Why? Because the white king moved to a square that is threatened by the black pawn on g5. So it is an illegal move. And also, if it is white turns and he does the move king e4 to e5, it is an illegal move. Why? Because the white king moved to a square that is threatened by the black's tool, by the black's pawn. So that is an illegal move. This is a legal move because the king is not under attack. He can move here. It is not a good move. I will explain you later why, but it's a legal move. And also, this is a legal move, or this move is also a legal move because the white king is not threatened by any black's piece, any black's tool. It is not a good move. I will explain you why later, but it is a legal move. The king is the only piece that must not be deliberately placed under threat by another piece. Okay, you can move any tool to a square that is threatened by the opponent's tool, except for the king. The king must not be moved to a square that is threatened by the opponent's tool. Okay, now I will explain you the rules of beating. Beating or eating is the same. If one of the opponent's pieces stands in the way of the moving piece, he can eat it. For example, in this position, the bishop moves diagonally, so this pawn stands in the bishop's movement, so he can eat the white pawn like this. Okay, or I'll give you another example. In this position, if it is black's turn, the black rook can eat the white pawn. Why? Because the rook moves straight and the white pawn is in the black's rook's course. So the black rook can eat the white pawn like this. Eating is a right and not an obligation. It is not an obligation like in the game of checkers. So by eating another tool, it means removing it from the board and placing the eating tool in its place. Yes? The black rook eats the white pawn, so we remove the white pawn from the board and we place the rook in the square where the white pawn was. Okay, the king cannot be beaten. You can threat the king, and when you do this, you can declare check. Yes. It is not obligatory to declare a check, but for example, if it is black's turn, the bishop can move to the square d6 and threaten the king. You only can threaten the king, you cannot eat the king. And if a situation is created that the white king cannot escape from the threat in any way, then it is a checkmate. Okay? It is customary to declare in a situation where he is exposed to a threat and cannot be defended for a checkmate or mate. So this is a situation of checkmate because the king cannot escape from the threat of check by the black bishop. He cannot go to h2 because he will be threatened by the bishop, and he cannot go to the square g4 because he will be threatened by the bishop that is on c8, and he also cannot go to the square f4 because he will be threatened by the bishop and also by the pawn. So this is a checkmate situation. So the black can declare a checkmate or mate, and black won the game. All tools eat according to their movement. For example, the bishop will only eat on its diagonal. So, as I have already told you, the bishop moves diagonally, so he can eat in the way that it moves. So, because of the fact that the bishop on d6 can move to the square h2, and in the square h2 there is a white pawn, he can eat the white pawn like this. So the tools eat in the way that they move, except for the pawn which moves forward but eats diagonally. I've already explained you that the pawn moves forward but he eats diagonally like this. So this is an exception. A special case of beating is beating through its movement or en passant rule. I've already explained it, and I will explain it later, but briefly I can remind you that what is en passant rule. In this position, if it is white's turn and the white moves his pawn 2 steps forward, then the black pawn has the right to eat the white pawn like this. I will speak about that rule of en passant. I will speak about it later. Okay. Now I will talk about the stages of the game. The first stage of the game is the opening. So the opening is the first stage of the game. At this stage, the player develops his tools, which are blocked behind the row of pawns, in order to allow them to control the center of the board and threaten the opponent's defense. So, the first rule is that it is very important to control the center of the board. So actually it is recommended to move the tools, especially the pawns, to the center of the board in order to control the center. The opening phase also includes the evacuation of the sides in order to allow the castling, which aims to fortify the king in a corner and keep him away from the exposed center. So you will develop your tools and you will evacuate the tools from the first row in order to allow the castling. In this position, the white can do the small castling. This is the castling, small castling. It is a good move because it is protects the king, it fortifies the king, and it also develops the rook to more center place. Here it was in the side, and by castling we moved it towards the center. Okay, a typical opening usually involves a double jump with the king's or queen's pawn. Yes, as I have already showed you, the pawn moves 2 steps forward. Also the black side does the same thing. And then taking out 2 knights and 1 or 2 of the bishops. So we take out the knights. The black side can take out the bishop, and also the white can take out the bishop. Then the castling. So the black can answer like that, and then the white can do the small castling. There are openings called gambits, in which one of the sides sacrifice material, usually pawn. So the gambit opening is when one of the sides sacrifice pawn. For example, the white moves his pawn 2 steps forward, and then the blacks answer like this, and then the white does c2 to c4. So the white actually sacrifice his pawn because the black can take this pawn, and then the white can answer by e2 to e4. So this opening is actually the white sacrifice pawn in order to control the center. Okay. So the white did this move, and then the black, if the black takes the pawn, then the white can answer with e2 to e4. So actually the white sacrificed a pawn in order to control the center of the board, because now, as you can see in this position, the white controls the squares f5, e5, d5, and also by that pawn threatens the square e5 and also the square c5. So the white sacrificed pawn in order to gain a control on the center of the board. The number of openings is large and the number of their variants is even larger. Professional players memorize many openings in order not to make mistakes at the beginning of the game, which will give an early advantage to the opponent. Okay, so we finished to talk about the first stage of the game, the opening. Now we will talk about the second phase. The second phase of the game is the middle game. Took place after most of the tools had already been developed, and the battle is at its most intense in the center of the board, usually while exchanging tools and trying to break the other side's pawn alignment. At this stage, it is possible to implement a large number of tactics to accumulate material and positional advantage. Okay, so in the middle game, your aim is to gain positional advantage and material advantage too, by implementing various tactics that I will not show you, but there is a lot of tactics to implement in the middle game in order to gain material and positional advantage. Okay? The third stage is the end game, and this stage happens when a large number of tools exchanges have been made without a decisive advantage being gained for any side. This stage usually includes a small number of pieces for each side, for example, a king, or a knight, or bishop, or rook, and the number of pawns, and in which the players try to overwhelm each other, usually by crowning one of the pawns to a heavy piece, such a queen. So, at that point in the stage of the endgame, at that point the threat in checkmate to the kings is small, and therefore the king becomes an active tool, protecting the pawns and supporting their progress towards the 8th row. So the aim of the pawns is to reach to the 8th row if it is the white side, in order to do the crowning. Then you can replace your pawn to a queen or rook, whatever you want. Because the endgame requires precise play, many players carefully study common endgame positions. Okay, so we finished to talk about the 3 stages of the game: the opening, the middle game, and the end game. And now we will talk about special moves and the situations in the game. We will start with the en passant rule, or beating through its movement. Okay? Pawn can hit another pawn through its course, or by the way, only when the opponent's pawn moves 2 squares forward. So if the white pawn moves 2 squares forward, then the black has the right to hit that pawn like this. So this is the right that only the pawn has, and not other tool. No, not another tool. So that rule, as I already told you, is called en passant move. So whenever the white side moves 2 squares with his pawn, then the black has the right to hit that pawn like this. The same rule is for the black side. And if the black, for example, moves his pawn 2 squares forward, then the white has the right to hit that pawn like this. So the hit is made as if the opponent's pawn has advanced by only 1 square. So even though the black pawn advanced 2 squares, we see it as it advanced only 1 square, and actually the white pawn hits the black pawn like this. The en passant rule is only valid immediately after the opponent's move and cannot be used afterwards. So, for example, if the black moved his pawn 2 squares forward, then the white has the right to hit that pawn, as I have already explained you. But if the white choose to do another move, something like that, then he lost his right to hit the black pawn like this. He can do this move only immediately when the black moves 2 square forward, then the white has the right to hit that pawn immediately. But if he didn't do it immediately, for example, he did another move, then he loses his right to hit that pawn according to en passant rule. Okay? So, we finish to talk about the en passant rule. Now, I will talk about the castling. This is when you do the castling in the king side, it is called the small castling, and when you do the castling in the queen side, it is called the big castling. So, in the game of chess, the castling is a joint move of the king and the rook that is considered as one move and is carried out in 2 stages. The king moves 2 squares towards the rook. The rook is moved 1 square after his king. This is the small castling, and in the big castling, it is the same process. The king moves 2 squares towards the rook, and then the rook moves before the king. Castling will be done under the following conditions. So actually there is a 5 conditions that must you must follow that 5 conditions in order to do the castling. If one of the 5 conditions are not fulfilled, then you are not allowed to do the castling. The first condition for castling is the king and rook didn't move at all from their starting squares. So actually that is the starting squares of the rooks and the king, and if, for example, the rook moved to this square and then, for example, the black did this move and then the black rook comes back to the point h1, then the white cannot do the small castling. Why? Because the white rook has moved. So the small castling is not allowed. But he can do the big castling. The same rule is about the queen's side. If the white rook moves to that square and then the black does this move and then the rook comes back to a1, then the white is not allowed to do the big castling. Why? Because the rook a1 has already moved, but he can do the small castling. Okay, so if you want to do the small castling, you are not allowed to move the rook, and also if you are not allowed to move the rook h1, and also if you want to do the big castling, you are not allowed to move the rook a1, and you also are not allowed to move the king. If, for example, the king moved here and then the black did something like that, and then it comes back to e1, then in this position the white cannot do neither the big castling nor the small castling. Why? Because the white king has moved to d1 and came to e1. Because the white king moved, he lost the possibility of doing castling, cannot do the small castling nor the big castling. Okay, so that is the first condition for castling. The second condition for castling is that the king is not in a check freight at that moment. So in this position, as you can see, the white king is in a check position, in a check threat by the black bishop. So in this position, that the white king is on threat of check, it is not allowed to do the small castling nor the long castling. So whenever your king is in a check position, you are not allowed to do castling. That is the second condition for castling. Okay. And the third condition for castling is the king will not be found in threat of chess at the end of the castling. Okay, so in this position the white cannot do the big castling. Why? Because if he does the big castling, the king will be in a threat of check after the castling, so the big castling is an illegal move. But in this position, the white can do the small castling if, of course, the king and the rook on h1 haven't moved from the beginning of the game. The small castling is a legal move. And in this position, the white cannot do the big castling because he will be in a threat of check by the bishop, and he cannot do also the small castling. Why? Because he will be in a threat of check by the black bishop. Okay. The fourth condition for castling is that the king doesn't move past a square threatened by opponent's piece. So the king doesn't move past a square threatened by the opponent's piece. By the opponent's piece. So in this position, the big castling is not allowed, because when you do that, the king must pass for a square d1 that is threatened by the black bishop. So the big castling is not allowed at all. And in this position, for example, you can do the big castling, but you cannot do the small castling from the same reason. Why? Because the king will have to pass through the square f1 that is threatened by the black bishop. So the small castling is not allowed, but you can do the big castling. So the king doesn't move past a square threatened by the opponent's king. Okay, so that is the fourth condition for castling. And the fifth and the last condition for castling is there are no tools that separate the king from the rook. There are no tools that separate the king from the rook. So, for example, in this position, you cannot do the small castling because the knight on g1 separates between the rook and the king. Okay? And in this position, you cannot do also the big castling because the white bishop separates between the king and the rook. So actually in this position, you are not, the white is not allowed to do castling at all, not the small castling and not the big castling. A distinction is made between the small castling, which is castling beside the king, and the big castling, which is castling beside the queen. Okay, if one of the rook has been moved, it is still possible for the other rook to be used for castling. Okay. So if the rook h1 is moved from the board, you have the right to do the big castling. If the square adjacent to the rook is threatened, it is not possible to make a small castling. In this position, you see that the square G1 is threatened by the black bishop, so you are not allowed to do the small castling. Okay, according to rule number 3, that says that the king will not be found in the threat of chess at the end of the castling. If you do the small castling, the king will be in a position of check after the castling, so it is an illegal move. So in this position, you are not allowed to do the small castling, but you can do the big castling. Because the king doesn't pass for the threat of the bishop. Even if the rook itself is threatened and the condition mentioned above are met, it is allowed to do castle. So I will explain you what I mean. In this position, the bishop on h1 is threatened by the rook. The white rook on h1 is threatened by the black bishop on f3. It threatens to eat the bishop in the next move. So even though that the bishop is threatened, even though that the white rook is threatened by the black bishop, the white is allowed to do the small castling. Because all the conditions mentioned above are met. So it is allowed the small castling. Okay? according to the rules of the game, to make a castle in, the king must not be moved first, and then the rook. So, according to the rules of the game, to make a castle in, the king must be moved first, and then the rook must be moved. So, in order to do the castling, first of all, you will have to move the king, and after that, you will move the rook. So, in order to do the small castling, for example, you will move first of all the king and then the rook. The same rule is for the big castling. In order to do the big castling, you must touch and move first of all the king and then the rook. Okay? Taking the rook before moving the king means a move where only the rook moves. So if you touch the rook, if you touch this rook, you are not allowed to do a small castling. Because in order to do the castling, the first king you have to move is the king. First of all, you will touch the king and you will move the king, and after that you will move the rook. So if you touch the rook, you must move the rook to any square that is possible, and you are not allowed to do the small castling. The same rule is applied for the big castling. If you touch the rook on a1, you are not allowed to do the big castling. You must move the rook to any square that is possible according to his movement. So in order to do castling, first of all, you must move the king, and only after that you will move the rook. Whether you want to do big castling or small castling. Okay? The castling is an important move in the early stages of the game because it serves two important purposes. First, it moves the king to a more protected place than the center of the board. And the second thing is that it takes the rook out of the center and into a better attacking position in the center of the board. So when you do the big castling, from one side it protects the king, is fortified the king, and it also moves the rook to the center of the board. The rook is actually in the center column in the column that is the center column of the board. The same thing is for the small castling. When you do the small castling, you actually protect the king and you move the rook to a place that close to the center of the board, or you move the rook to column F that is close to the center of the board. Okay? The castling is the last move added to the chess rules, and it appears in the book of the French author Claude Groget in 1560. So we finished to talk about castling. Now I will talk about the decision. Okay? What is check? Check refers to the situation where one of the players attacks his opponent's king. That is to say, the king stands in a situation where in the next move he will be taken if no action is taken. So, for example, this is a check position, and actually the black bishop threatens the king, and if theoretically the white did an illegal move d2 to d3, then the king is taken from the board. So that is the threat of check. The threat of check is to kill the king in the next move. So the king is threatened to be taken out of the board, yes? If no action is made, if you don't block the threat or move the king to another square, the king is threatened to be taken, to be killed, to be eaten by the bishop. Okay? In a check position, the attacked king's side, must cause the check position to stop in any possible way, whether by eating the attacking piece. For example, I will show you what I mean. So in this position, the black threatens check by the black pawn on f2. Actually, he threatens to eat the king, he threatens on the king because the pawn is eat diagonally. So the king can eat the pawn. in this way he actually eliminated the check threat. Okay, so you have the possibility to eat the threatening tool. In this case, it is actually the black pawn on f2 that threatens the white king. So the white king can eat the pawn on f2. Yes, this is one option. And the other option is to block the path of the attack, So in this position, the black rook actually threatens check. The black rook threatens check on the white king. One of the options is to block the line of the attack. In this way, the white blocked the line of the attack, and this is a legal move. Or by moving the king, the third option is to, when you have the check position, you can move the king to other square that it is not attacked in this square. But it must not be moved to the square that it is not being attacked. But it must not be moved to the square that is being attacked. So in this position that the black rook is threatened on the white king, it is not allowed, the white king is not allowed to go to e1, because in e1 it is threatened by the black bishop. If none of these actions are possible, the situation is called checkmate. A situation which the king cannot defend himself at all. So in this position, actually, the black did a checkmate or mat on the white's king. Why? Because the white cannot move to any square that it is not be threatened. In this square, the king is threatened by the queen. Also, if he moves to this square, it will be also threatened by the black king, and if it is moved to the square e2, he will be threatened by the queen, and the same thing is if he moves the queen to e1. So this position is a position of checkmate by the black. The black did mate on the white king, so black won the game. So checkmate or mat occurs when there is a threat to the king. First thing, it must be a threat to the king. The second condition is that the king cannot escape to any place that is not under threat. In this position, as you can see, he cannot escape to a square that it is not under threat, as I already showed you. And there is no tool that can protect the king. So the third condition of mate or checkmate is that there is no tool that can protect the king. In this position you can see that there is no white tool that can protect the king. Okay, the white rooks cannot protect the king nor the white pawns. Whoever managed to checkmate won the game. Okay, also there are several rules that regulate the matter of check. The player must not make a move so that his king is threatened by check. I've already showed you this position. For example, in this position, the king is not allowed to go to e1. Why? Because in e1 he is threatened by the white queen. Okay. And when he is in a check position, he must be caused the check position to stop if possible. Any other move in a check position is illegal. So in this position, that is a check position by the black rook, the black rook threatens the king. It is not allowed, for example, to take the black queen. This move is an illegal move. Why? Because the black rook threatens the king. So we cannot do any other move except for removing the threat on the king by the by the black rook. If the opposing player is not playing, if the opposing player is not paying attention to the check and makes an illegal move, his king must not be hit and his attention must be drawn to the fact that he is threatened by check. The illegal move is cancelled and he must make another move in its place. So, for example, in this position, if the white did an illegal move by hitting the black king, then you must tell your opponent that you did an illegal move, and actually if the opposing player is not paying attention to the check and makes an illegal move like taking the black queen, his king must not be hit and his attention must be drawn to the fact that he is threatened by the check. The illegal move is cancelled and he must make another move in its place. So you should cancel the illegal move by moving back. You will move back the queen to the board, and also the rook will be in its previous square, and then you must take the king to another square in order to eliminate the threat of check, to stop the threat of check by the black rook. Okay? So we finished to talk about the rule. Now I will explain you what is a direct check. Moving a piece so that it threatens the opponent's king by itself is called direct check. In this position, if you move the white bishop from h6 to e3, in e3 it threatens the white king, so actually you moved a tool that threatens directly check on the king. This is called a direct check. The same thing in this situation, you can move the rook from f6 to g6, and actually the black rook is threatening the white king in check, so this is a direct check. Also, if you, for example, move the black queen to the square g5, the black queen threatens check on the white king, so you do direct check by the black queen on the white king. So this options is a direct check. Moving a piece so that it opens a line of attack for the piece standing behind it to face the opposing king is called indirect check. In this position, if it is black's turn and he moves his pawn from c5 to c4, this move is called indirect check. Why? Because when the black pawn moved from c5 to c4, actually he opened an attack line for the black queen. In this situation, in this position, the black queen threatens check on the white king. So in this position, when you move the black pawn like this, you actually create indirect check by the queen, because the black queen threatens check by threatens check on the white king. The same thing you can do if you do in this position that move, you actually did indirect check, because by moving the bishop from g5 to h4, you actually expose the white king to a check by the black rook. Okay, in this position, the black rook threatens check on the white king. So when you moved one tool and exposed the king to a check by another tool, that is indirect check, because you moved, for example, the bishop to another square, and then you expose the white king to a check by the rook. Okay? So indirect check is when you move one tool and expose the opponent's king to a check by another tool. Okay, so that is indirect check. Moving a piece so that it itself threatens the opponent's king and at the same time opens a line of attack against the opponent's king for the piece standing behind it, that is a combination of a direct check and indirect check in one move. It is called double check. Okay? In this position, if you move the bishop from g5 to e3, you create a double check because actually you create a check, a direct check by the bishop, and you also create indirect check by the black rook. So this move is called double check because you have two black tools that threatens check on the white king. The black bishop threatens check on the king, and also the rook threatens check on the king. So actually you moved the bishop to e3 and it created direct check by the bishop and indirect check by the rook. So you created a double check. Okay? So moving a piece. So a double check is exactly what it sounds like. A king is put in a check by two pieces with a single move. Okay? There is also a type of check known as cross check, when a player responds to a king threat with counter check while blocking his opponent's check. So the last term that I will teach you is the indirect check. So in this position, the white rook is threatens check on the black rook is threatens check on the king, and if the white king does this move, actually it created indirect check. Why? Because from one side he escaped from the check of the black rook, and from the other side he itself created a check on the black king. The black king is threatened in check by the white bishop. So when the king is under the threat of check, like in this position, and you move the king, and by moving the king, you yourself create a check, a counter check. In this example is by the bishop. This situation is called indirect check. Okay? Thank you very much.